actually been to BHIVE Workspace before? Just raise your hand. Okay, so what was the experience like? General, anything you would want to say about it? Okay, okay, did you attend any of the events? Okay, okay, all right, good. So as you all know, so we are actually a co-working space. We operate from 5 locations in Bangalore. So a good number of them are coming up as well. And we are the largest of its kind in Bangalore. So this is a platform for entrepreneurs, freelancers, SMEs, small startups, even organizations to come and work harmoniously under one roof, collaborate as well. So it's specifically designed, as a flexible workspace, and is designed for productivity as well. So today we are basically going to talk about sharing economy. So that's the topic. So BuzzFest, as you all know, is a quarterly flagship of BeeHive. And, we've come up with topics, mostly, looking at how the audience has been reacting to certain things, our posts, our events. So we decided to come up with sharing economy this time. So sharing economy is also synonymous with, collaborating consumption, as you all know. So how many of you took Ola or Uber to come to this event today? Raise your hands. Oh, wow. And everyone else? Like private transport? Okay. So Uber, as you also know it, has been a benchmark for sharing economy. And sharing economy technically is now synonymous with Uberization. That's a term which is born out of that entire concept of Uber. So it all started because, we live in an era of copious amount of cyber and non-cyber information. And this is the time we actually, optimally utilize the resources for our needs. And sharing economy, the phenomenon was born out of the fact that, people at this point of time realized that they had to regulate their consumption because they don't want to be victims of hyperconsumption. And that is how the entire concept of sharing economy first came into place. So we have a lot of interesting, panel discussions and all, as you all know. It's all over the social media. And, that's something which we're actually focusing on this time. So. Yeah, please come. So in the meantime, I would like to, extend my gratitude to all the sponsors. So Edureka is our principal sponsor. Thank you so much. This event, I can clearly see it's just like house full. It's so good to see everyone over here. And 48 East is the food partner. And Your Story and Tech in Asia are our media partners. And our outreach partners are TIE, Indian Angels Network, NASCOM, Zivasa, Vodafone, Reliance, Jio, that has also been there. And I think now we should go for the panel. Yeah. So we are starting the panel discussion. So the first discussion that is there. So, we have the stellar lineup of speakers who are actually on board for this. All of them have come up? Just wait for a bit. Yeah, so the first topic... So the first panel discussion, the topic is Don't Own, Just Share. That's a way forward for Indian economy. So I'm going to introduce the speakers And please come on stage. We have Gaurav Arora, who's the head of startup ecosystem APAC Amazon. Please come on stage, Gaurav. Aravind Sanka, who's a co-founder at Rapido. Rohin Pinto, who is head of Karnataka of Oyo Rooms. Please come, Rohin. Shah Gehlot, who is a head of or the founder at MyIndianStay. Shesh Paplikar, who is a co-founder at BHIVE Workspace. And Jitendra Jagadev, who's a co-founder at Nestaway. The stage is all yours. And we also have the moderator, who's Sindhu Kashyap, and she's a senior correspondent at Your Stay. Your story.
There's a lot of stays here already. You
guys be very careful with the fan.
That would be my Jennifer Lawrence movie. Yeah, I'm good. Okay, can we have mic here? Thank you so much for start up with the mics that work. That's for grabs people. But in any case. Okay, so thank you for braving the Bangalore traffic and coming here. So we have a huge panel here. We're keeping the conversation really free-flowing and easy. And post that, if you guys have any questions, you can ask any of the panelists that. So I think we'll start with brief introductions from all of you and a basic idea of your idea and your opinion of shared economy in the Indian context per se. I think we'll start with you.
Sure. Hi everyone. I'm Jitendra here, college Jitu. So I one of the co-founders of Nestaway. Nestaway we started 2 years back. One of the pioneers in the shared economy as such, because we were the first to start shared living as such in India and elsewhere. From last 2 years, we have grown to like serving now 30,000 people staying with us today, and across 12 cities in India. And the good part that I would say that after we started in India, there are people who have mirrored us in China and US. So it's little other way around where like we have been followed in elsewhere. And what we believe is like the world is moving much more towards shared economy where the costs, what we call like collaborative consumption of things, right? So basically people can share things, peer-to-peer lending and sharing of things. So we started what we believe like sharing of houses to start with. From there, today where we sit, people share their living costs, they share their utility, even they actually share the movie ticket costs. So that's where we have reached, and we aim to reach further. And our aim or vision is to be the largest virtual city of the world, where we host 1 million people staying with us every night. Thanks.
That's it. Thanks, Jitu. I'm Shesh Paplikar. I'm one of the co-founder of BeeHive and also the CEO. I think some of you would be familiar that you're already in BeeHive. So our focus is essentially how to deliver a quality workspace experience for a larger section. I think we all know that we all crave that Google or a Facebook has got an amazing office, right? Be it a productive environment or a community or an office where I would go and everything works, I can focus on my work. That's something which is not always available for a larger section, be it smaller companies or even companies with 100 size, etc. And also, how do you manage the costs, efficiency, etc. So that's the problem we're solving, and that way is the whole focus is where we can utilize the resources better through technology, processes, etc. and deliver this awesome experience for the larger section, larger workforce of the world. And I think one thing I always remember is Jitu, and we started our company almost at the same time. So Jitu, I didn't fully understand. He had not yet started operation when we had already started operation. He came to me and said, "You know what, Shesh? What you're doing for desk, we are doing beds." And I was thinking, what exactly does it mean? And now I understand.
Hi guys, Shan here. I think one Nestaway has already solved the living problem. Shesh is solving the working problem. So after you have lived somewhere, worked somewhere, MyIndianStay is solving where you want to travel next. So we started a couple of years back, first company in this space, vacation rentals. We started with one guest house in Goa, and now MyIndianStay has 40,000 rooms across India, from Leh Ladakh to Kanyakumari. The whole idea is that when you are traveling, instead of staying in a box-shaped, boring room, you can stay in somebody's apartment, somebody's villas, cottage in Himachal Pradesh or a Haveli in Rajasthan. The whole idea was, as a starting idea, that India is very diverse. A good way to see it, not just by visiting the place as a tourist, but experiencing it with the locals, living with them, and that was the origination of the idea. So while you are getting these experiences, you are also sharing your moments with the family, with the people with whom you are staying with. The idea has matured quite a lot. We are now into managed services as well, where somebody owning a holiday home in Goa, they visit a couple of times in a year. Rest of the times, they have 100 friends around the world using the same space whenever they are traveling. So yeah, MyIndianStay is a small story about MyIndianStay. Before that, I graduated from IIT Bombay, started working as a financial trader, and that's how I ended up starting MyIndianStay.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I think I'm the third person who's solving the stage problem over here, right? So if this goes bad, you will end up fighting on stage. Okay, yeah. On a serious front, that would be very interesting. Yeah, so I am Rohin Pinto, and I'm part of the OYO team. I think most of you would probably know Ritesh. Yeah, I think he started off as a 17-year-old trying to solve this problem of whenever people travel to a different city, they would always find a friend or a family where they could crash in rather than check in into a hotel. And we started off a long way, around 3.5 years back, and we've scaled this journey in the last 1.5 to 2 years to touch close to around 70,000 odd rooms that we do have, and we cater to different class of customers. So that's what OYO does. On the shared economy, and I think the point which Sindhu was talking about earlier, I think before we open the floor, there are a couple of things that I'd like to say, and I think the more important part is the challenges that we face in India. More than always saying that India is open to the shared economy, I think it's about the challenges that India does face. And are we ready? Okay, I know that there is extremely a huge amount of potential. We have all the numbers going in our favor. But are we actually ready? And that's something that I'd like to put off as a point in discussion before we start the whole thing.
Good evening, everyone. This is Aravind Sanka. I'm a co-founder of Rapido. Rapido is essentially a two-wheeler ride-sharing platform. So you might be traveling to office on daily basis. Definitely one of the major problem is the traffic. So how will you go to your office by quick and also which is affordable? So that is what the pain point that we are solving. We are solving with India's most common man's vehicle, which is a two-wheeler. So we helped more than 70,000 people to travel within city in our last 1 year with the help of more than 10,000 bike riders who are ready to share their bikes. So we started a year back and we have grown. Right now we are executing more than around 3,000 rides on a daily basis. And one thing what we realized is people value for their time a lot. So if you are able to, that's the reason if people instead of buying an asset and maintaining it and maintaining it, it requires some more effort and more time than to just share with someone else. So that's where the Rapidos is one of the route. Rapido is the route to start to solve this commute problem. Thanks.
I am Gaurav. I head the startup ecosystem initiatives across APAC for Amazon Web Services. Now, how many of you here know what AWS is? Most of you, right? Like, it might have sounded a misfit, amongst the founders or startups allowing, shared economy through their proposition versus the technology player. But if you think of it, AWS has been one of the pioneers of pay-as-you-go consumption model. So if you have ideas, you don't need to build your own servers, databases, you don't need to do all that heavy lifting. You just focus on your core business proposition and then leverage all these servers and the backend infrastructure stack through a utility basis. And if you think of the shared economy model and the drivers behind it, which you could probably categorize in 3 or 4 pillars, such as technology, social, economy. So we are the technology enablers. And for India also, this is what is actually leveling the playing field for all these Indian startups versus the big giants in the US, for example. Look forward to having interesting discussion.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much for your introductions. It was quite great and nice to have your view. But if you look at sharing as a concept is not exactly new. From when you were kids, you were told to share stuff, whether it was your toys, books, clothes. You share your. If you are the younger sibling, you would know you don't get anything first hand. Everything is second hand, right? The economy bit comes when you add a layer of monetization to it. So before we get deeper into how difficult it is in India or how easy it is going to be in India to build a shared economy space, just wanted to understand from your perspectives of, how does the monetization per se and business models work for this whole concept of sharing and shared economy, whether it is stays or technology or bike sharing, ride sharing. It's kind of confusing at the moment. So how does that work?
It's a very interesting question, actually, especially in case of MyIndianStay, where the question of, let's say, an owner owning an apartment in Bombay or owning an apartment in Bangalore, they are getting a rental yield of around 2.5% is around Bombay. Same owner owning an apartment, let's say, in Gurgaon or Delhi, gets a rental yield of around 1.5%. Similarly, few of the owners, which we have seen in Goa, whose properties are managed and rented it out on a short-term basis, some of the owners are getting, on an average, these owners are getting a rental yield of around 4 to 5% and above. It's a very important question of monetization. When does an owner of any asset, whether it's transportation of a bike or a car, or let's say an office space or a homeowner, decides to choose or deviate from a conventional earning process? It happens when the alternate shared economy concept or monetization presents an income or a regular income that they can rely on. That's a trigger point. And that's an early stage learning that we realized, which helped us tremendously, and that helped us compete against larger players, much more funded players. And that is something very intrinsic in India. We understand economics really well. A lot of people think that technology is 3G doesn't work. When the case is of economics, we work around using our normal Nokia 3310 mobile phones as well. We learn how to share when we take our first train rides. A 3-seater train, all of us, I think, must have experienced sitting 4 people very comfortably. Imagine it's the same situation in France, a country maybe just 1/4 the size, but India has 10 times the population. Make these guys sit in a train and ask them to share it. France would be in a revolution once again. So, as a concept of sharing, intrinsically, we are much more compatible. But understanding that intrinsic monetary trigger point, which can enable any asset holder to generate an income higher than the conventional one, that has helped us tremendously to grow ourselves. and that too in a bootstrap manner, and making a cash flow positive both for the customer, for the asset owner, and a platform level. So, yeah.
How does it work for renting? Something like renting.
Right. So for us, we more believe like sharing is the way to preserve cash. Right. So basically, if you have seen Friends way long back, they used to share rooms, right? Whether they say same flat, right? So by sharing, you could actually cut down your costs. You could save more, so that you have the money to do what you would always love to do. So that will give you the power of spending on things that you would think on investing on yourself. So like typically when we started in Bangalore, I remember like I came to this office to finalize office space here. If you remember, right? So way back that time, like when we started in Bangalore, the security deposit here was 10 months. So we go back and so the biggest challenge was at Nestaway we have 2 months of security deposit, because we believe that's a fundamental thing that should be there available, because it's just like removes your affordability to live a good life by paying 10 months of security deposit. So from there we started, and at a cost, like suppose a cook comes to your home, rather than one person paying for it, if there are 6 people who pay for it, that cost got shared. So from there it starts to internet everything. So today, if next time we have actually started something called like internet itself prepaid model, right? So at homes, if you log in, you have login password, you could actually pay as low as 50 rupees and use a 80 GB speed internet. So those are things only are possible if you have a very collaborative model where like collaborative consumptions can happen. So at a homeowner side, we give returns and all that. That is
Right.
second. Primary thing is people who use us, they are happy that they save money.
So different perspective. Different perspective. So one is asset owners monetizing on those assets, but the other side of the story is that people who are consuming are now able to afford a lot more luxurious assets than they would have been able to if they were to buy those assets, right? And I think together, if you collaborate on these or join these dots, right, the net effect utilization for the economy drives a lot more economies of scale. Like co-working spaces like BHIVE is getting VC funded because it's a more viable business. The utilization factor as a fundamental thing is very good for the whole of the economy.
Right. From a technology perspective, when AWS first came and everything, like right now it's quite well known, as the audience know. But how does the concept work for something like an AWS or an OYO or Rapido? How does it work like that for you?
So see, from technology perspective, most of the genesis of the AWS services started with our realization that we've mastered that. Is this not working? Yeah, I can hear myself better now. So see, the genesis of all this AWS started with we realizing that we have mastered managing these scalable data centers in our backend for the Amazon.com business itself. And then we at Amazon had a number of different business units who were trying to solve the same problem, and they had like similar requirements on servers and all. So this whole model of internally first decoupling and sharing the different modules within the company, which then led us to think this could be very interesting proposition for anybody outside AWS also. Right? And that's also now leading to most of the different services that we see coming on the platform. First tried and tested, build an expertise internally, then just don't keep it yourself. Don't own it totally, just share it with others. And the good thing, the beauty there is, once you share it with others, that multiplier effect kicks in. You see so many different applications or use cases of the same thing that you yourself would have not been able to do.
Hello. Yeah, it's a different kind of economics for our riders who are offering rides to our customers. So in India, there are a lot of underemployed and unemployed people who knows a skill of driving a bike. These are the guys whom we are targeting. Like if you just offer a ride while going to office, and if you're coming back to office, these guys increase their income level by almost 15 to 20%. And imagine if the same person is offering for one more hour when he's free. So we are improving his income levels, health is from livelihood of the family. I think that's a way that we are impacting the lives of people through a bike sharing.
Yeah, if I have to actually answer this or maybe summarize it, I think there are three ways in which this could be monetized. One, I think in a sharing economy, you take one case of an Uber or Rapido, it's definitely efficiency improvement. So Uber, which probably used to have, before Uber Ola came into Bangalore, you had half the auto drivers driving all of us literally mad, haggling, and they would always, you'd think twice before taking an auto. And I think Ola and Uber have solved that problem to a large extent, and Rapido, sorry, have solved this problem to a large extent where they've improved efficiency. And I think that's the first model. The second, I think, which is very, very interesting, is the point which Nestaway has done, is about bringing down costs and increasing affordability. So similar to what Nestaway has done, and a couple of the other brands, where something which was aspirational today becomes affordable because it can be shared. You can rent it, you don't need to buy it. You have so many of the furniture companies, Sanka, for example, they're doing this. You probably thought 5 times before buying that cupboard, but today you can rent it. And the third and more important is what Find My Stay and Oyo have done, where we have given an opportunity of an unused inventory, which goes for nothing at the end of the day, to be reused or used in a way in which everyone makes money out of it. I think a very important aspect here is we were able to bridge the gap between supply and demand, and hence create more demand for it. And that's the way we've been able to monetize that.
Just a bit on when we speak about monetization and scales, economies of scale, like you were mentioning, India has a massive population size, number of people here are huge, but as a country we've always been owning apna gadi, apna ghar, that's been a very thing, but you see that consumer shift happen slowly. So a bit on your understanding of how long it's going to take, or how difficult the process has been to bring in that basic shift, because you still don't see it in everyone. You just see it in the younger generation. You still have your parents telling you, why don't you buy a house, or why don't you buy that car, buy your own furniture. There's a certain mindset associated with even renting furniture, for that matter, or a homestay in that sense. So how do you break that mindset, and how does it work in that?
I think one of the important aspect is that there is definitely, I think the evolution of technology, and he's definitely changing the consumer behavior. And overall, even though given the topic, I wouldn't say don't own at all, but there is obviously somebody has to own it. So if nobody owns it, we don't have anything. So the question really is, I think it should really shift towards a mechanism where the people who are owning it are better at financial control. They are looking it as an investment, right? They have analytics behind it, because there can be platform like Nestaway, Oyo Rooms, etc., which is going to tell them this is the kind of return I can make. So I think ownership is really best left to people who are more efficient at owning this and getting returns out of it. This really prevents wrong investment and better utilization of the resources in the world, which should obviously, a better investor is going to create more and more resources, which platforms like ours can exploit, right? Coming to the other side of it, now the question is, to really experience something, do I really need to own? I think that is an aspect which is changing, right? There were times when people would rent a very small house. I know people living in very, very small house, and then they build a big house, when their kids are almost about to leave their home, right? Right. So now I think the things are changing, where people have realized that, to be able to meet my aspiration, I don't necessarily need to own, right? It's an experience. And that whole behavior shift is happening, where people are totally fine, not to own a house or a car. At the end of the day, this is the experience I'm getting. So this distinction also, I think, as Jitu and all pointed out, will also make them more and more efficient, right? At a very early stage of a career, I start buying so many things, and then I realize, hey, I can't afford it, and I sell off my car and try to buy a smaller car. A lot of these inefficiencies would happen, but now the whole inefficiency is reduced to a large extent. I think that will make people make wiser decisions.
The challenge of bringing that mindset change initially, that's been a task for many. Even today, it's still a task. So how do you bring that in?
So we keep on doing surveys to get more consumer feedbacks and all that. So pretty interesting insights, like one of the guy that we spoke to recently, he stays at Nestaway Prestige Santiniketan. That's one of the good properties around Bangalore. He stays there. So basically I was just tracking his Facebook timeline, right? So he stays at Prestige Santiniketan. he regularly uses Ola and Uber to commute to office. There are a lot of photographs in his timeline which shows he uses sometimes Mercedes, sometimes BMW for his weekend rides. Okay, and very luxurious life. So we made and understood like what is your income and how is your expenditure. So he told his monthly net income per month is 45,000 rupees and his outgoing expenditure is 55,000 rupees. So these are the millennials which are talking about, right? So people have gone into a state where people like perhaps my generation, as you mean like we are the old generations now. So preferably we would think of Prestige Anthony-Niketan, okay, when you are earning like 3 lakhs per month, okay, you afford Prestige Anthony-Niketan, right? So people have gone into that affordability, first thing. Second thing is like people tend to aspire for things which they want to get at much earlier stage rather than owning it. So I think after this feedback, we also introduced in Nestaway that you could pay security deposit through EMIs. So today, actually, every money, even your rent is payable by EMIs, because we know there are people whose incomes are less than their expenses. So things have changed drastically, right? So before these things didn't actually exist, but now you see Zoomcar is there, where you see. So we were talking to some of the Zoomcar things like Zoomcar average salaried people who are there is like 30,000-40,000 users. So that has changed and that has drastically changed.
I think what you were also alluding to is a cultural mind shift, right? And I can think of two things there. One is the ease of renting out those assets, which is enabled by like EMI kind of platforms, or also the whole technology layer on top of it. So if you have a car, if you want to rent it out, it should be very easy for you to rent it out for a weekend drive, or if you're renting out a car for Uber or whatever, Ola. So I think that has been fundamentally changing the mindset of a lot of asset owners, right? And the other piece, I think, is somewhere on the insurance or the coverage. I think some of you could probably talk about like this whole fear of, will my asset be misused? Right, so something I think, like for example, on the insurance, car coverage and all, some of you can talk about the trust factor. Yeah,
Renting
yeah,
home, for example,
yeah,
you still have so many questions asked.
Exactly,
Whenever
exactly.
a millennial goes to rent a house,
Yeah.
Are you going to get boys in? Are you going to get girls in? Is there going to be parties? So that mindset is still.
Yeah, I think there are several measures being put in by a lot of companies like these, and there was last piece I was thinking of. It also depends on the use case. If you're looking for like interim use case of an asset, which is like for a short period of time, pay as you go definitely serves the best purpose. But if you're like thinking of some stationary asset which doesn't need like constant refresh and things like that, then there is the other equation coming in whether you'd be better off totally owning it at some point of time.
I would like to include one more point is that yes, everything is going in the positive direction, but just a caution is that it needs to be sustainable. Sustainable for the end user, for the asset owner, as well as the end consumer as well. We have seen in case of Uber, Ola, and I'm not sure maybe with Rapido as well, that for last couple of, let's say, quarters, the driver incentives have gone down. So the incentive for the asset owner earlier was not real. It was artificial just to bring in the demand. The reasons could be very different. But going forward, the caution has to be there that it needs to be very, very sustainable. How we are building this whole process. Though we are very, very quick adopters, but these shocks can affect. So maybe I think that could be one topic that we might discuss.
Right. I think he has
Just 2 points I'd like to add. I think one is the fact that owning something today is still seen as a status symbol. And I think that's something we haven't touched about. I think people still love to say my car, my house. And while sharing is definitely there, it's there for convenience. You use it for a lot of other things. You still at the end of the day want that my factor in it. And I think it's a personal choice. I don't think it'll ever go away. That's the one thing. The second thing is the point which you had mentioned about on two things which I personally feel are holding us back. One is the trust factor, when you move across, and the second is the predictability. Because with every new shared economy company that has come in, the first experience is sometimes good, the second is not always that good. And I think building that culture is something that we need as as an ecosystem to work towards.
Just to add one point to discuss about monetization and all. So one way why people are sharing, a lot of users in either Rapido or maybe some other company, they own their own vehicle. There are people who own their own bikes, but still they order a Rapido and sit back and then go to their office. It's because one thing that they have seen is the time that they're wasting on the traffic. It's better to sit back and do their work, either to listen to music or listen to maybe some videos or do something by sitting back. And this is what that we have seen in people slowly in terms of they compare with the amount of money that they can either earn with the free time. Should I drive it or should I do something else? Right now they are accessible to data, accessible to information. What else can I do or what else should I learn so that I can improve in my lifestyle? I think these are some of the things which are also a factor in while people choosing between sharing or owning a vehicle. That's what I want to add.
Shesh, this is specifically for you and to understand from your perspective. You have been in New York, you've been in the US where co-working as such is a evolved concept and even sharing as a concept is quite evolved. What do you think can come to India in that perspective? What can India learn? How is it different? How are the markets different in that sense? And how are the people different? More than the markets, I think it's the people who make up the market. So how are the people different?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. Yeah, one is I have spent good amount of my time in US. I was in New York. I've experienced some of the things like co-working space there. One of the things I would see the difference is a shared economy is something that is definitely evolving in advanced countries like US. It's also evolving a developing economy like India. The big difference is I see that it's probably, I personally feel that the evolution will be much more stronger in a country like India. The reason being that the inefficiencies are and the trouble people go in setting up things or getting an efficient service is a lot more difficult in India than in US. I think the simple example is, let's say I'm an entrepreneur, I have a startup of 2 people. It's a lot more easy in US, to sit in an apartment where you wouldn't see power cut, be it water trouble or an internet problem. These basic things itself is pretty much given in the US. No FUP limits on internet. So even those basics are a lot more difficult to have in India. So I do see that, giving a co-working space to an extent is also, one is obviously a sharing economy like US where better cost and economies of scale and all that is brought in. But beyond that, the efficiency for the end customer itself is quite different, which is very much true, which I think many others pointed out, be it Oyo, be it Nestaway, etc. Before, having Nestaway, I know people would probably rent an apartment and sleep on the floor, right? Which was not really uncommon, because, hey, I don't want to buy the bed because in 3 months I might be leaving Bangalore. So these kind of things are really sort of changing. And the people itself, I think, definitely now see that there is no point. I think, 10 years back, it was so much common that people would take a place and sleep on floor. But now the consumers are changing. And I think people here are as aspirational as anything. I think after coming back of living in US in 8 years, I could see that it's sometimes I feel, people are a lot more aspirational in India. And given that there is, I think other difference is ability, labor is cheaper and the ability to, bridge that gap is definitely exists. That arbitrage is there. And I think that's what we all are sort of, dipping into.
Just your last thoughts on, how startups, the infrastructure, technologically wise and otherwise as well, can work towards building a stronger shared economy in India. Last thoughts, and then we'll open it up to the audience for questions.
So, shared economy has just started. As we know, the monetization part, rather the demonetization part has been more recent, right? So the good part of that is people have tried to understand this, right? So around 15 days back, I was in Delhi meeting some government officials who had called me to understand how sharing economy works in India. So that's the progress, right? So suppose now people are opening up to understand how this is working because they understand a significant part of a economy is actually is evolving in this space. So where we see this going is miles away, where we are telling like actually don't own anything. You start living your life, right? So we can imagine like people staying at Nestaway, working at BHIVE, taking a Rapido to home. When they're taking a vacation, they go on Oyo. So this is what is happening, and it is just at the start, right? It's just evolving, and we see a formidable future ahead where much of this tendencies are actually coming up. Like in US, it's very common, right? So TaskRabbit was there 10 years back, 8 years back in US, right? So US shared economy is much more evolved. That's the reason like Airbnb, like this year, what I was hearing, like they have crossed $2.2 billion in just in revenues. The $2.2 billion that we're talking about is purely shared revenues, right? Because so those things are working well in US, and definitely India is catching up in a big way.
I think I should give an opportunity for.
I mean, just finish the last one.
Yeah, I think to summarize to an extent, be it a developed country or be it a developing country like India, the demand for better services definitely exists, and I think the way we solve it, the challenges we face might be different, but the awareness is definitely growing, and aspirational to have the quality service is always there. And that does open up room for all of us, be it Rapido, be it OA rooms, be it going on a vacation, so all of these, quality is definitely expected, and that's going to only drive this kind of a model more and more, where we have the ability to get the capital, we have the ability to create the technology or the operations and deliver that high-end, high-quality service.
Yeah, I think while we are there, because I was just talking some time back, and we have all the numbers going. If you look at it, I think by 2022, I mean, what numbers I've picked up, 65% of India is going to be below 35. I mean, we're talking about this whole generation going through this whole, stage where everything is changing around them. And, I think it's going to be a case where shared economy goes ahead. However, I personally feel there are 3-4 big bottlenecks. I think the infrastructure part, which he spoke about, government regulation, and I think, while the ecosystem has moved ahead, I think the decision makers, that is the government bodies, the authorities, these kind of people are still waking up to that. And I think once we get these things combined in together, it will definitely move on much faster, because India is a very different market, and scale is always there for us. So it's very difficult for something to go wrong, because you always will have scale. The only challenge you see is competition.
Yeah, slowly what we have realized after working for almost a year is, on the sharing part, right now technology is not a lot of differentiator right now. It's more like become like a necessity. Anyone should follow the technology, and it should be very accessible to each and everyone who wants to share or who wants to take a ride. So on the other important thing, that on the culture thing that has been changed a lot is, right when we are started, we thought, okay, let's start it only for male. Let's not maybe start for female. But what we have realized is there are more than 10 to 15% of our customers who are female. So this is one of the major culture shift, I should say, that a female sitting back of either a male rider, or there is a male rider who is taking male customers with her. So I think it has been evolved. I think still we are at very nascent stage. There are more than 100 million bikes already on the ground, and there are more than 300 million rides that are happening daily basis. So I think there is a lot to be done, and because of there are a lot of technology changes, right? Either call it as a digital cash, or you call it as a geo, which has enabled internet to each and everyone. I think as going forward, as the technology enhances, the sharing economy will evolve much more larger, right? From the guys who are earning a lot to someone in the middle class to middle class, and also a type 2 cities.
So I think on the monetization, it's quite intuitive. There's a lot of demand also. All that is good. The only two things that will drive this momentum forward, one is on the technology, UI, UX experience, and the second is the trust factor. I think together we all need to collaborate on that and take this together ahead. And one thing which we didn't sort of touch upon is also the environmental benefits of, like, if you are carpooling to the office, there is this lot of greater good cause to that. And just to quote my last words on this panel, like even I have a 3-year-old, and even in the kindergarten, all these rhymes they teach sharing is caring. So let's live up to that.
Thank you so much. I'm sure, yeah, we're coming to that. We'll come to that. Thank you so much. I'm sure it's been an insightful experience for everyone over here. This has been absolutely fabulous. I would like to remind you of two things. First of all, taking a cue, from our subject of sharing economy, you can share your views, your perceptions on Twitter and on other social media. The hashtag is BuzzFest, or you can even use the hashtag #ShareInIndia. On Twitter, it's @BHIVE Workspace. So please share it, on every portal that you know. And two most active Twitterati would also win goodies from BHIVE Workspace, which is also sponsored by Rapido. So, just get clickety. And we are taking also feedback. So there are two media for it. One, you can give it at the exit, and another, like at the end of the entire thing. Our volunteers will be going around and taking feedback from people who are interested to give it. So please share your feedback with us. And from this panel discussion, we are taking, 3 questions. So please keep it concise and to the point. Okay.
Hi, I'm Sumit. My question is primarily to the startups who are working on hospitality side. Question being that the supply side is always a bit of challenge in India because there are so many combinations of factors that come in terms of quality, the perspective of the asset owner in terms of what exactly it becomes and so on and so forth. So what exactly is the way forward on that? It's a more of, I travel a lot, but every time I book up something, I realize that 80% of the time the experience, especially in guest houses or rentals, is different from what exactly I expected, right? So what's a way around manage around that, specifically in Indian context where we have the cultural differences across the space?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the biggest problems we do face today. Last year, year before last, while we grew really fast, this was one mistake we made in terms of trying to, how do you standardize the experience at different locations? I think one of the solutions that comes out here is actually going much, much deeper than what meets the eye. Because the person who's actually doing your room or taking care of that experience is a young boy who's probably never gone to school. He's probably traveled out of his hometown to reach a place to find a job, and he's just doing it for that salary that he does get. The first thing we have tried doing is actually trying to change the way they live. Because, for him, it doesn't make a difference if it's a white bed sheet, as long as it's a bed sheet, that's fine. I mean, in the way he stays, he doesn't even get a bed sheet. And I think bringing that discipline in the way they live is something that we are, I'd say, working towards. I don't think we are there yet. We are definitely working towards. The second thing that we are working towards is we've set up a center in Delhi where we've partnered with the National Skills Institute. And we're going to be imparting training in terms of to people who want to do something with their lives, but they don't know what to do. So instead of running, catching a train, reaching the station, getting caught by a tout or an agent and being put into some line of work which he or she doesn't want to do, we get that person to come in. And I think that's the fundamental change that we are working towards in how we could change that particular problem.
I think especially for vacation rentals, it's a very, very important question. Hitting the nail on the head. We are taking a little different approach than OYOs. Here, we cannot skill and train every and anybody out there. we are a small startup. We have to focus on our exact problem. And we learn, I think Uber is a very good example. Same exact taxi drivers who used to drive taxis take you or me around in a similar car, old car, but now the same car is better managed. These guys are better or well spoken. I think processes plays very important aspects, especially if you compare, if you book a vacation rental via Airbnb, House Trip, 9 Flats, or Vimdo in Europe or in US or HomeAway. Culturally, people in the West are a bit more organized than India. You will get exact directions. This metro, 300 meters, take this bus, walk 200 meters, turn left here, this is the code, go here, this. We have on our platform properties from 500 rupees a night to 50,000 rupees a night. Infrastructure wise, top class properties are there. We had early on seen that, and we experienced that exact same problems, that a 25,000 rupee a night property, everything is 5-star. A customer books a property, and a small thing, a toilet roll is missing in the toilet. These small things kind of reduces the whole guest experience. But all these things, how we focus is process-wise. So there is a training process which we guide our host through that. Of course, not all properties can be managed personally by us. Another line of business vertical is where the properties are managed by our company. So the owners are there, sitting in New York, London, Bombay or Delhi, owning a holiday home apartment in Goa, marketed by MyIndianStay, managed by a different vertical, with the specialized services. Property managers are there. And these property managers with the housekeeping team, these guys welcomes the guest, gives a tour of the property to the guest and show them, and all these things are done through processes. The next step, again, we are taking a learning from Uber. The property manager on MyIndianStay will be eliminated by an app. How you do an online check-in in an airplane, in a similar way on our properties, any and every guest will be able to do an online check-in just through an app. You book a property, you go to the apartment, there is nobody who would be delivering you or handing over you a key, a physical key. Your mobile phone will work as a key, and this is already happening in some of our test properties. Rest, right now we haven't figured it out, is the housekeeping stuff. How can we even automate or even standardize that until unless if the robot, there are some vacuum powered robots are there. Uber has done the driverless cars, but we will reach there someday.
How you guys are planning for the tier 2 cities, because sharing economy in the tier 1 cities is okay, but how you guys are gonna expand your things in the tier 2 cities? Yeah, that's my question.
Especially for MyIndianStay, actually, we are, after all, we are a business, so we focus where the business is, and that is completely a business decision. So we are very strong in leisure destinations. How we affect tier 2 population is when these guys are coming to Goa or Himachal or Leh, Ladakh or any of the Kerala cities. That's when they get exposed. And similarly, smaller cities, if there is a potential, then yes, we would be present there.
I think, yeah, so this is something, I keep getting asked quite often, be it, when you talk to media or investors, etc. So, as Sean pointed out, I think we are after all a business at the end of the day. We are not government in that sense where I would want to just go to a village just for a social cause. We have investors to answer to. So at the end of the day, if it makes business sense for us, obviously there is a value we are providing to the society by creating co-working space. It helps the startup ecosystem. There's better infrastructure that's coming in. But I don't see that very immediately. I think as a business, as a decision, I think first is all about us surviving and being able to do well to our investors. So from that perspective, from BHIVE's perspective itself, we don't very much see the opportunity is so high for a BHIVE to be at a tier 2 city now. I think the first is to go to the larger cities where similar experiences like create in Bangalore can be created. And if it really, I think the analytics tell us that it makes business sense to go to a tier 2 city. At the end of the day, it's not about tier 2 city. If it makes sense to go to that city for my business, we would definitely go there.
Same here, right? So basically, today we are present in 13 cities, but most of them are like tier 1. Tier 1 as such, if you see like Indian GDP, top 10 cities contribute to 85% of the GDP. So volume also goes that way, but we have not been afraid of kind of venture into some strategic places. Like we are planning to start recently in Vijayawada, because like there is a requirement of 40,000 people who need to move from Hyderabad to Vijayawada. So if there is strategic interest, obviously Vijayawada falling into tier 2, we are there. We are there today in Ghaziabad, we are there in Faridabad, those locations. We are planning to start in Kota, which is tier 5 perhaps, but it's a strategic decision, end of the day.
For a market like Rapido, it's like people travel in each and every city. It's not only a metro city that people will travel. People travel in tier 1 and also a tier 2 city. But one of the very good part for us is the supply availability is there irrespective of which city that you go. The two-wheelers are more penetrated in rural areas than in urban areas. The amount of guys who are owning a two-wheelers. So I think we need to spend a lot of energy on how to send them information about a sharing economy, how to educate them about this. If you are able to do that, then I think the only thing that can work in tier 2 city is a two-wheeler than a four-wheeler. So I think we are betting a lot on two-wheeler market in tier 2 city. So, but we are yet to launch in any other city, but we will be there in some other tier 2 cities soon.
Yeah, I think we are already there in most tier 2, but I think the challenge that does come, and I think as everyone touched upon it, is about how you make it a sustainable business. So it's very easy to start off there, but I think working a different model such that you bring down operational costs would be, making it succeed in a tier 2 by bringing down operational costs would be a challenge, which is something which I think each company would work towards differently.
Just to add to it, I think if the problem doesn't exist, there's no point solving for it. So for some of us,
hi, my name is Arun and I run a startup in the sharing economy space, and it's all exciting, all good, etc. But I want to specifically touch upon a point. That Jitendra and Rohin mentioned, which was about the government regulations mirroring this sector, right? So does it make sense for, especially because it's the government regulations and they're a little slow on catching up to what the sharing economy does. Does it make sense for sharing economy companies to come together and have a body or such which provides a single voice for the entire economy? Because that's something that, for example, e-commerce never had, right? They were bickering within each other. Whereas sharing economy, let's probably live up to the name of a sharing economy and share within each other. Because secondly, just one more thing is also because the consumers also, right? Everyone connected. The same guy living in Oyo rooms will be in, doing a Rapido, doing different things. So a consumer gained in one of those companies is technically a consumer gained in the entire sector. So that was a point which I wanted to ask, and if something can be done on that.
So just to brief you on that is like there is already a body for that, right? I am just forgetting IMIDI or something. I can get back to on that, which is actually a conglomeration where Ola, Uber, Stagila, most of the people are already present today. Internet Mobile Association of India or something like that. Exactly, I can't recollect, but that's an association which formally kind of today pitches to the government, and that actually tries to collaborate on the common problems, mostly related to regulations, state bylaws, right? So those type of typical things, taxes. So that was the IMI it's called. So that was majorly driving GST across startups. How does the startup policies are there? So that exists today, and mostly we can actually all be part of that. That's actually working.
It's not industry specific.
Yeah, it's not industry specific. But most of the so the good part of it is like it's working out to a large extent. India, the benefit is like unless you are a large scale, the government doesn't wake up. So you have a leeway till you kind of become a multi-billionaire. Then perhaps. So then the problem starts. So till then we are safe. Like so, till 2 years you are safe actually. Not a problem.
No, we actually did put up 3. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for this discussion. Okay, to extend our gratitude, from BHIVE, there are goodies for every one of you.
So we have this.
Okay, so now we're going to have like this short round of quiz. So I'm going to ask a question. If you know the answer, please raise your hand. Our volunteer will go, and if your answer is correct, then you win a goodie. So the question is, name the first company in India to focus on self-driven cars. Whoever knows the answer, just raise your hand. Can you raise your hand again?
Is it Zoom car?
Congratulations! There's a goodie for you. So we have our keynote speaker here, Greg Moran, who is the CEO of Zoomcar. So Greg has truly been a visionary and has revolutionized the concept of self-drive car rental service in the country. So thanks to his effort, we can, just get a car, just drive into a posh location, maybe a Mercedes for the fact, and not think about the bank balance. And it's not going to burn a hole in our pocket. So that is the thing. So, we can avoid the entire hassle of owning a car. And most importantly, it is very convenient. And, this is something which is pretty affordable as well. So, Greg, we welcome you to come. The stage is all yours.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming out. So just to start off, I think it's always pretty funny when we're introduced as a company that focuses within self-drive. Because I was recently back home in the US for a couple of weeks in November. And whenever I talk to people and say, okay, well, what is Zoomcar? And you say we do self-drive and we do self-drive rental. People get incredibly confused. So pretty much nowhere else in the world outside of India does self-drive mean, oh, I'm going to rent a car, hire it by the hour, by the day. So we always have a case of mistaken identity because people say, oh, self-drive, then, that means autonomous cars. That means no one's driving and the car's driving itself. So that is, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 20 years in India. But that was a cute little anecdote. And then, here, when we started in 2013, because we're talking about the shared economy and collaborative consumption. When we came at it, I grew up in New York and then spent time in Philly, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and car sharing, the concept that was pioneered actually way back in the 80s in Germany, then made its way over to Europe, and then made its way, broader part of Europe, and then made its way to the US in the late 90s into the 2000s. Car sharing meant that you were able to take a car for a couple of hours, roam around the city, and kind of do your business, get on your way. And then when we came to India in 2012, 2013, and when we launched the service, we were saying, okay, we're India's first car sharing company. And then we said, oh yeah, this is collaborative consumption. And the funny part of that is we were probably 2 years too early in terms of that marketing pitch. Because when we launched in February, March of 2013, almost 4 years ago, absolutely no one had any idea what that meant. So we would tell people, oh, we're doing car sharing. They're like, what in the world is that? Am I taking a car? Am I going to share it with people? Am I going to go and do carpooling? Is it ride sharing? So that whole nomenclature of the collaborative consumption, the shared economy, was actually nowhere to be seen. And so that was in 2012, 2013. And it's amazing though what 4 years can bring to the table, and the whole notion now, where I think sitting here in sort of January 2017 in Bangalore and across the country, the whole notion of collaborative consumption and the idea of sort of car sharing and being able to pool assets together is something which is, I think, not only sort of widely understood, but it's something which now is very much real and is the future. And just to kind of highlight on a couple of themes that I've seen in this space in terms of the evolution from 2013, just speaking from someone who's in the business of cars, is that, and I think all of us can probably attest, going back 4 or 5 years, when you thought about, okay, I come out of a good school, maybe I come out of IIT or NIT or BITS or wherever, and I start my career and I start doing well, my first job, my second job. The natural inclination is that I have an arc where I'm going to buy a car, then I'm going to buy a house, then I'm going to get married, right? And so that was kind of the arc of a guy who's coming out and who's going to go from being 21 to 25 to 30, and that was a natural arc. And we saw that across various companies, and that attitude was very pervasive, not only in Tier 1 cities, but Tier 2 cities. And I saw it myself in 2012, 2013. But what was really remarkable is that kind of over that time, we started to see a transformation in thinking, particularly as it related to cars. And I think I like to think part of it was because of what we were helping to build out as an ecosystem to support people who didn't want to own a car. But I think a lot of it was from our friends at Uber and Ola, who've also been pushing in a similar direction to really think about an alternative for ownership. And I think the important piece there is that really the whole notion of collaborative consumption, it can really only really blossom and flourish when you have sort of viable alternatives, and when you have the network effects, you have the ecosystem that's there. But I think for us, what we've seen in this time frame, especially over the last 18 months, 24 months, is that the perception and the notion of sort of what is desired from owning assets, I mean, that's largely changed. And I can see it in my own company and the companies around, where people who have plenty of money, who otherwise would have 2-3 years ago would have purchased cars or would have purchased houses as well, are actually not doing that, and they're actually preferring to spend their time, spend their money on experiences, on having flexibility and having convenience and having mobility. And I think those are really sort of the buzzwords, if you will, the themes that people are really looking at. And I think the way we view it, and the way I view it at Zoomcar, is that you have sort of this evolution in psychology where, just like when we started our business in 2013, our first customers were people who were 25 to 30, and they were early adopters. They were savvy when it came to technology. They understood these foreign business models, and that they were comfortable taking that leap of faith. And I think just like that happened to us in 2013, just more broadly speaking, as it relates to the notion of sort of shared ownership and collaborative consumption, as a broader industry, you see the early adopters are people who are always under 35, right? And so we've seen that now, where now I realize that we're at a bit of an inflection point. Like when I go and I say I meet with an investor who's 45 or 50 in Mumbai, and he's telling me that of course he has plenty of money to afford this, but he's saying, I'm actually selling my car. I don't need a car. It's a total waste. I'll use Uber. I'll use Zoom. Whatever I want to do. And a lot of people who are now outside of that early adopter range are starting to move in this direction, which is actually really cool to see. People who are on the other end of the generational spectrum, to realize that yes, this is something where a lot of the time, owning assets, whether it's owning a car or a house, it actually doesn't make sense. It actually becomes a hindrance, and it becomes a liability, and it becomes a crutch. And I think we've seen that with sometimes you look at the volatility in the market as it relates to real estate prices, property, and you also, as we're seeing now, the pinch at the pump in terms of fuel prices, in terms of insurance prices going up, in terms of the volatility from banks, partially due to demonetization, but other trends that are there as well. People realize that it's just, in many cases, it's just not going to actually make sense And so I think the fact that we've reached that inflection point is really powerful. But that also means that we're kind of at the cusp of what we call sort of the collaborative consumption sort of 3.0. So the understanding of the fact that now it's actually going to become so much more universal that people are now, there's a general acceptance that people have a comfort level that, yes, they can partake in sort of a larger sort of marketplace as it relates to sharing of goods, sharing of assets. And that's what at Zoomcar we've really been pushing very aggressively over the last 6 months or so, which is our ZAP program, which allows people to either buy a car and then attach it with us on a part-time basis. So you can kind of share in that. So half of the month, say 15 days out of the month, you can drive it yourself. Half of that month, you can list it on our platform and actually earn revenue and offset your EMI by 50%, 75%. And that's something which it's a model that's broadly been done in some other avatars in China, in Europe, also in the US. And I think that's certainly reflective, representative in the car space. But we're starting to see it now more and more, not just with houses and models like Airbnb, but also I've seen it pop up in terms of offices like workspaces, having sort of a fractional sharing attachment there. There's obviously platforms for renting various equipments or different sort of services that you can partake on a part-time fractional basis. And so the fact is that the sharing economy is, I would say, at a very major inflection point. And so that's what I think makes the next 2 to 3 years even that more exciting, because what it allows for is a lot more inclusion. So from an economic standpoint, you obviously have people who will be able to sort of leverage existing assets and sweat those assets, be able to actually earn, in some cases, I mean, we've seen people making 25, 50%, 75% more income on a monthly basis. And so I think what that really, you think about it from an economic standpoint, that's really quite empowering. I mean, the kind of slack and leverage that gives the economy, think about that much more disposable income in the system. It's much better for your local community. It's much better for e-commerce. It's much better for broader local commerce as well. And so I think that's where we believe the collaborative consumption space and the fractional economy, that is going to be that tide sort of raises all ships. And that's a really important point to note on the economic side of it. But I think for me, what's even more important is actually as we think about the environmental attributes. And so this is, of course, more tied to our industry, to transport. But what you're seeing is that when you look out at not just with Zoomcar, with cars, but you're seeing it with companies like shuttle and buses. You see it in the truck space as well. You're seeing it in vans, etc. So all across the ecosystem, which is highly, highly distributed, what you find is that when you're able to share in a resource, you're able to, of course, remove other resources that would otherwise be in the system. And I think that's really the name of the game for us, because when we look at, even in our older model, which was more of a lease-backed model, where we would take cars on a permanent lease basis, for us, the way we viewed it is that for every car we would put on road and induct, we would actually be taking off about 17 cars, based on the notion of fractional usage and the fact that you could sort of cram down like 50 to 70 to 100 people on one car in terms of the overall usage patterns, which was really neat. And that's something which, as we multiply that out, you can very easily see. I mean, for us, we have a fleet of around 3,000 cars. So we've already been in a position then where we would have stripped off over 50,000 cars, 55,000 cars from the roads across the country. So that's quite material, and that's just obviously one company, and we're still relatively modest in size. But if you look at that as it relates to the fractional sharing of buses, for instance, or trucks, which can belch out like 100 times the emission level of a car. When you think about CO2, you think about particulate matter. This is a real concern, and it's an issue that's very burning for me as well. I mean, I think all of you guys would attest to it. I don't know how many of you guys try to run outside in Bangalore. It's really not, it's quite a hazard, right? I mean, I'm from New York. I'm used to going for a run anywhere, anytime, but I literally have not run in Bangalore in 4 years because the air quality is so horrible. And, that's something that we have to take ownership of and have to address. And, fractional ownership, the shared economy, as I was saying, I mean, if you can look at it from a bus standpoint, and you can strip off. I mean, let's be honest, we're not in a world here in India today where we have electric vehicles with any penetration. If I look India, we sell. I mean, I'd be curious. Take a guess at how many electric vehicles. Does anyone want to guess how many electric vehicles India sells per year today? Does anyone have any guess at a number? How many? No, 2,000 in terms of cars, electric cars. And we have some electric bikes, but electric cars, just 2,000. Electric buses, it's negligible. It's an afterthought. It's a rounding error. So the challenge is that, because that, we know that our buses, they're burning, whether it's diesel, whether it's a LPG blend, you have, kerosene burning out into the environment. When you think about that on one single bus, now if you look at, okay, we understand that electric vehicles, there's a huge, there's thousands of crores that have to go into this sort of investment. But if we can actually just pivot that out and think about collaborative consumption and think about these fractional sharing models, and you pool the resources effectively, well then you can actually reduce that by an order of 20 or 30 or 50. And that's a really, really powerful way of actually improving air quality, reducing the actual asthma rates, reducing the any sort of lung-related disease, which is really zapping a lot of the public health expenditure. And so I think that's a real issue, which unfortunately probably doesn't get as much coverage, but it certainly should, because collaborative consumption has that power. And it's like going back to it. It's really about the network effects that it brings, because over time, what you find is the idea of shared ownership and collaborative consumption has the power to really transform, because it tends to be highly viral, very, very powerful in that sense, where you really talk about, and this is sort of the final point I wanted to end on, is that you have a lot of positive attributes that come from it in general. But the most positive that I see when you think about shared ownership is the community and the network that it really builds. And so with Zap, we think about it as the ultimate revolution in how to own a vehicle. And it's about creating a platform of hyper-local users that are very close to their community of owners as well. And so those two sides speak to each other, bond, and that's what creates the symbiosis that really allows for a tremendously rich experience for customers as renters as well as owners. And I think what you find is, and this is something that I think Airbnb's done really, really well globally. I'm sure a lot of you guys have stayed at Airbnb either here or abroad. But I think the idea of community and a sense of ownership and sort of pride in kind of what people are doing there is, I think, really, really powerful, because people oftentimes ask us, they say, oh, with Zap, are your service levels going to go down, or are you going to see an issue that you guys don't own the cars and you're not taking care in the right way? And I say that's total nonsense, because the idea is that no one will take care of an asset better than someone who's using it themselves. And I think the power now where we are with technology today, when you think about IoT devices, when you think about cloud-based services and the ability to remotely monitor and track and control for quality, collaborative consumption actually couldn't have existed 5 years ago, 10 years ago, because the technology just wasn't there. I can tell you in our industry, you wouldn't have been able to have any sort of intelligence around the cars. One of the things that we do is we focus on tracking and monitoring the health and wellness of the car in real time, real-time understanding and alerts triggered and fired when customers are not driving properly. And that makes our associates feel much, much better, much safer. And the same goes for a lot of other industries in this space. And I think that's where you have this ultimate convergence, where you have this sort of the technology angle, you have sort of the business model angle, and you have this broader community sense, which is really, really coming together. And so I think it's that confluence which puts us on a tremendous overall trajectory as we go ahead here. So I think those are the main points I want to touch on. If you guys have questions, happy to entertain and have a bit of a dialogue.
Hi, I'm Shomo. So, Greg, one of the things I think in 2011-12, that time, there was a lot of companies who thought India was a chauffeur-driven market. And while you had Hertz and others who tried the self-drive model, because of insurance issues or things where people manhandle the cars on self-drive, there was no faith. And you came in as someone from outside India, you kind of created a new business model, I would say, for the self-drive market, which didn't exist. So what has been the hurdles that you face creating a real new business model in India, where you're actually seeing that, you have both sides, right? So one is the increased penetration. So you talked of electric vehicles 2000, so it's gone to those people who are early adopters, but doesn't cross the chasm. Similarly, when you're looking at, let's say, self-drive itself, you have aspirational people. But on the other hand, people are buying more expensive cars. I mean, no one wants an entry-level car today. I mean, if you look at the youngest people, everyone wants a mid-sized car or an SUV, right? So how do you actually drive that growth in the market? How do you create a new business model? And what are the challenges you faced?
Sure. Yeah, well, I think it's really, for us, it's all about selling experiences and having that really be at the core. And for us, we've never been a commoditized product. We've never been a service which is going to be used and availed multiple times a week, like an Uber or an Ola. I use Uber every day, but I'm not going to use a Zoom car every day. So we'd be delusional to think otherwise. But I think for us, we have people who want to use us 2 times a month, maybe 3 times a month. And people maybe once a month or once a quarter even, and it's really about making sure that the value that you're able to bring them is really going to be differentiated. And so the way we think about it, we always segment our users like any good entrepreneur I suppose would, but we think about it in the bucket of folks who own a car already and who want to avail self-drive, and then folks who don't own a car. And so the majority of our guys don't own a car, and so for them, it's always going to be a little bit more aspirational, right? So they will want to have either more of a pure experiential trip, which oftentimes is outstation or kind of roaming somewhere slightly afar, and then those guys will like to have maybe an SUV or maybe a luxury car, or a much bigger car. But then there are the people who are looking at it more from a functional standpoint, and they realize that I want something that's a little bit more practical for the city, where a compact, like a Maruti Swift, would make a lot of sense. So I think it's just about mapping those different use cases and getting the right balance. But I think for us, we have for instance, a huge part of the business is out of the airport, and so the folks that come in and use it mainly for business purposes for a day or two, and that is going to be obviously inherently different from someone that picks it up here or we deliver it to their place in HSR, and they're going to Pandi for a long weekend, public day. So, I think we are really focused on building products for both sides of it, and then also really when we do our outreach and marketing and community building, we want to make sure we're speaking their language to kind of get them really tied and hooked to the experience, because that's how you build loyalty, that's how you build stickiness, that's how you ensure that people are coming back to create that highly differentiated customer experience and the usability.
Okay, thank you, Greg.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. Yeah. Okay. So we have a goodie for you. So a volunteer will come and give it. So now it's time for us to go to the second panel discussion. So for the first one, we had co-founders on board, the ones who pioneered their ventures, who spearheaded the projects. And now for the second round, we actually have investors who are the ones who are funding the projects. So the panel 2 topic is sharing economy trends, VCs weigh in. So we have a line of eminent speakers who will come up. So I would call out the names and request them to please come up on stage. There's Prayank Swaroop, who is the principal at Axel Partners. So Prayank, Alok Sharma, who's an Indian Angels Network investor. Shubhankar Bhattacharya, who's a VC at K Capital. Shubhankar, are you here? Anuj Dugal, who's part of the Google Launchpad program at Google. And this panel discussion is going to be moderated by, okay, please come Shivankar.
Sorry, I didn't know that.
Okay. Yeah. So it's going to be moderated by Nivedita Bhattacharjee, who is the editor of Tech in Asia. So the stage is all yours. Please continue.
I'm scared I'm going to fall. No. Sorry, I'm a short person. I can't climb on this. Oh, there you go. Thank you very much. Now I'm well, whatever. I'm the moderator. I can be on the yellow chair. Okay, to start this, let's do this. You guys have heard about sharing economy and how we should all collaborate and why it works, right? So I thought to start, before we start on why the people who are backing, the guys with the money want to put money in these companies, let us ask something for this room. This includes you guys. How many of you guys here took an Ola or an Uber to get to this place? How many of you guys look up Airbnb or OYO rooms when you travel? There you go. And how many of you check out companies like Furlenco and others when you move into a new house or want to? Well, I think that gives you an idea of why we are talking about shared economies, right? So to start with, let us. So we heard from the companies, we heard from Greg, we know why they think that their business model works. But let's ask you guys, do you think? Okay, let's start with this first. What gives you the biggest kick? Do you believe in this model first? If you don't, you can tell us you don't. I think we're fine with that. And if you do, what about it gives you the biggest kicks? What do you think is going to make it work? And the answer has to be something other than India has 1 billion people. That is a prerequisite. We will not take that answer. Shubhankar, you want to start?
We'll share. All right. Firstly, really terrific audience out here. Thanks for having me as part of this panel. So yes, in spite of all the disclaimers by Nivedita, there are indeed 1 billion people. So most things can get drawn out of proportion in terms of market sizes, etc. So I think obviously there's exciting things about the sharing economy, other things that need to be taken into context in a more cautionary note. Indians by nature, it is a bit of a stereotyping, but I think we expect to a large extent even demand value for money, right? And there are use cases specifically where if you can get past owning things, that actually can imply, if not in the longer run, at least in the shorter run, savings. And I use the word quote unquote savings very cautiously because it varies a lot from case to case, on a case to case basis. On the flip side, sharing economy also, of course, implies the whole gig economy concept. You're also trying to, the other aspect of value for money is you're trying to make as much money as you can. Obviously, there's limited resources in terms of time. And there's a whole bunch of people coming up, trying to do driving an Uber or teaching math classes or English classes elsewhere in the world. So I think, yes, a cliche term, there are 1 billion people, but there are also many aspirations. Everyone wants to get as much bang for buck, but they also demand quality, which is probably not as easy as it is sometimes made out to be in the sharing economy. And I think if you can reimagine what the likes of Infosys did to outsourcing, which if you just take a step forward and think about it, it is kind of a sharing economy. You no longer have to use your own resources to do work. You kind of outsource it to a different entity which pulls it all together. So this could very well be the next generation. Infosys has already proven that it can be done and you can create a global company out of this. And I'm at least individually, I'm very hopeful that an exciting generation of companies will kind of exploit that.
So, Shubhankar, so we have a slightly nuanced view of the India market. So we don't believe it's 1 billion people. We believe it's 157 million consumer households, the guys who have the money. And the guys sitting here, the guys who most of the startups target, guys who
you can't target a Uber to probably a farmer right now who's blue collar workers like that. So as a startup, these discussions can become very theoretical. As a startup, what we see is people come and people don't pitch about who their consumer is really. Right? So you can't say that everybody in India has a home, so I will target real estate. It doesn't work because even in real estate you have affordable housing. So what is your target segment, right? So for sharing economy, we try to look at it that way. So we funded, for example, Taxi for Sure, and it was based on the whole idea. And now we're investors in Ola. It was based on the whole idea that yes, sharing economy, there's not enough cars, but people want, there's not good public transport in India. People want public transport. People don't, the cost of owning a car is very high, but the convenience that the car provides is much better. In the beginning days of Taxi for Sure, there were customers who were booking 200 rides a year on Taxi for Sure. And we were like, who are these people? Then we went and spoke to them. And it turned out to be all pregnant women. Because for them, the family had one car, husband would take the car out, but then they had to go to doctor, they had to go to multiple places, and that would turn out to be a use case for them. But so these are these hidden pockets of use cases which you find when you do these things. Another example is, for example, we have funded Rento Mojo. One of the largest users of Rento Mojo are young working professionals, guys who have come out of college or are still in college living in 2 or 3 BHKs, or people. Oh, you can't hear.
I'll just hold it a little.
I think that's because of the background noise. So I'll try to speak louder. So we have also funded Rento Mojo, which does furniture rentals, and the way it's a very interesting model. So the users who are there are people typically young professionals, college students, or just newly married couples who just moved to a new city, right? So it's very clearly defined, and we try to see from that audience can they build a sizable business fundamentally, right? So even though it's sharing economy, you can't just say sharing with everybody. You have to find that specific users who will spend that money, and basically that's what we're going after. So I think the big thing is when you can't just airbrush a number. You have to say this is my segment. This is the spending power this company has, right? So to give you some sense, for example, when we looked at all the taxi driving companies in India at that time when we invested, we looked at what is the market TAM, what is the available revenue for these guys. So high level people will say, oh, India market is like $4 billion of taxi rides happen every year, growing at 30%. But for a taxi company or taxi aggregator, you only get 10 to 20% of that as a revenue. So that is your TAM. And so you have to be very clear when you go build any of these business models at that.
Anujalu.
Sure. So, quick question. How many of you guys use Google products? Everybody. Yes. How many of you guys use Google search? Yes, every day, everyone, right? So at the end of the day, if I ask you one question, how is it operating? Where are the servers? Are we using intense information which is there with the Google's vision of helping generating all the information from the raw data and providing it to the users, right? So it is also one of the sharing economy. Right? But at the end of the day, if we analyze like what is there in for developers, there are so many things. We have Google Cloud Platform, we have Firebase, we have different other products as well, which are actually helping developers to use those servers and scale with any kind of number you have. You have millions of users, you can do that. You have 10 users, you can do that as well. So we basically provide a platform where we help developers, we help startups to scale their products, not just for one user, but for millions of users as well. So yes, we do believe that sharing economy is one of the things which is taking upfront. But again, you ask that billion number of people are there in India, and how many? I kind of agree with you. How many are online today? Are we building products for people who are in rural areas, right? Have we thought of that what is preventing those people not coming online? And if I talk about rural people, how many of you guys think that those people will come online through desktops or laptops? No, it's only mobile users. And are we making our products which are mobile friendly? Those are the people who are going to use your product for the first time, and if they do not land up in using your product with a good user experience, definitely it hampers. So if we are talking about next billion users who are not still online, and we want to target those markets as well, we need to think that how we are building our products basically for different models as well, different form factors, not just for laptops and things around it.
So most of the work we do is in seed funding. So VCs come in later, and we start working in seed and maybe part of the angel network. I think the challenges we've seen, we've funded 3 companies very early and actually worked along with them in mentoring them, is like you were saying, get the use cases right. The cost of acquisition of consumers is still high. So how do you prove the business model? How do you take it to a level where an angel network or a VC would consider it for funding? And I think the markets are extremely fragmented, and it's kind of to get the right use case, to get credible quality of service to be delivered for your brand. For example, we funded a company called Zaplooks, and so they were providing beauty services at home. They did a quite a phenomenal job, but they could not raise the next level of funding, so they sold off to one of the big companies, and they did an equity swap. But the challenge there was that the professionals who are there, like Uber and Ola, took a lot of time. First, the driver quality, the car quality was not correct, and people are having a lot of bad experiences. So the company had a challenge whether to build a brand or to really go after the shared economy. And therefore, they ended up hiring a lot of people initially and spending money to get the quality right so the consumers can get it, so they can move to the shared economy structure. But do you have enough time to make the transition? Do you have enough money? So I think those are the kind of challenges that companies have to get. Because it's largely related to consumer, the cost of acquisition of consumers is pretty high in India. You do require some level of money to reach a stage there. So a lot of entrepreneurs we see, shortchange, and they feel that the revenues will start coming in much faster. So they raise a much smaller sum, and then really run out of money, and they're not able to do the things, and then therefore they're not able to get to the next. So that's the kind of thing that we've seen in some of that. And I think platforms like Google are great because anybody who has an idea doesn't have to build the technology anymore. You can really scale your business and build your business because whether it's Google or Amazon, they all have the big iron, and they have everything that is there. And I think it really depends on whether we have the passion. But even when you go for a seed funding, I would suggest that it requires to figure out how to reach a critical base, how much is the cost acquisition of each user, how will you find the use cases, how many mistakes can you make, what's the time frame, and can you really build a business that you can take it to the next level.
Shubhankar, you wanted to add to that?
No, not specifically this. Yet another high-level statement. Even VC funds by themselves, or the whole model of VC funding, in case you guys are wondering, is also not immune to the effects of the sharing economy. If you guys are familiar with angel-less syndicates, that's probably the sharing economy taking over VC funding process itself. And there are few opinions out there that might be the future of VC funding itself. So just throwing it on.
So, but speaking of airbrushing numbers and speaking of who is our target audience, that is my next question. I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about the same thing too. When we talk about companies that have, everybody uses Uber and Ola and Airbnb and Oyo as, examples of how great the sharing economy is going to be in India. But they are mostly targeted at city users. They are mostly targeted at, people like us here. So, question number A, is India, Greg was talking about an inflection point. I guess my question is, are we at an inflection point such that these companies can sustain themselves, be a real business? And when I mean be a real business, I'm a little old school, so I'm thinking eventually can they be profitable? Because I'm thinking if you're not making money, you're not a business. So A, that. And B, in all the sectors that we talk about, which are the sectors do you guys think have the more likely chance of being successful at doing this? Who wants to take this first? You have the mic, so why don't you go?
I will go first. Okay, fine. So, answering your first question, definitely, in terms of making a profit, you have to be, first, it's not just about already established startups, it's also about early stage startups as well, right? Firstly, you need to have a minimum viable product. Do you have that first in place? I was talking to a startup yesterday who is in a fitness sector, right? And he was asking, what is the future of fitness startups in India? And I asked him like what you guys are doing and how much you have been already achieved. He has been with a team of 5 people, and he has already created a product. But at the end of the day, how many users are using it? Only 15 people. And when I drill down to the level like what exactly the product you have, he's not at all tracking my health progress, right? So do you have a minimum viable product first to go to the market? And if you do have, then find a fit. Do not just enter into the market. Find a fit like where exactly your product is solving a challenge. Just don't enter into a market, hey, this is an online market and we see that these many number of users are going to use my product. That's perfectly fine. But at the end of the day, how many you guys are going to retain? How many of them are engaging with your application? So definitely once you have a MVP and then you find a challenge area, go for it, right? And it definitely makes sense in a long run how it's going to give the profits, right? And when it
I just want to cut. Yeah, I just wanted to cut in here, guys. This is if you have a question, please raise your hand. It's okay. We will take your questions. We'll go back to the conversation. Let's do it like that. Yeah.
Feel free, yeah. You want to go ahead?
No, I kind of cut you in between.
So why don't?
Sure.
There you go. Yeah.
Sure.
See, I have seen at least in Bangalore, startup system. See, I have been tracking the startup ecosystem from early to 2015. From 2015 till now, see, we have seen a huge amount of capital infusion from VCs into startups which may have a viable MVP or may not just have a flink of an idea and still got funded. And many those which today are thinking that they have really a good idea and probably they may also have bootstrapped but are finding difficult to get funded. So don't you think just the problem of today what we're facing is also because the way the VCs funded earlier and they were looking at short-term gains rather than looking at India as a market which actually you have to root for long and actually you have to invest for a period of time.
So were VCs being short-sighted when there was a lot of money floating around and have VCs
See, well, they started with the wrong year to track startups. 2015 was not the right year to track startups. 2016 also the wrong year. You should have started earlier, right? So if you're talking about India long term, you have to go all the way back. See, the way it works is VC business and startups. Business is all game theory. Right? If it's an interesting market, you can't say that I'll have only one company. Right? There will be multiple people who come. Once a company gets, one of the reasons why media people like to leak stories is it's coming hot off the press. But the reason we like to keep it confidential is we don't want, if it's a good idea, to get competition tomorrow. Right? So one of the questions you asked was, which areas are we looking to invest? We are looking to invest in those areas which nobody has heard of. When you look at it, you're like, this is not a sexy idea. Why does VC raise money for this? Right? Because competition kills businesses. Right? And once competition is there, then people get all irrational. One VC will fund another company, one VC will fund the other company, then they'll get into a funding war, then all sorts of customer acquisition costs will go out of whack. So, and that's one of the reasons we try to find those pockets where, nobody's thinking. But obviously the very big opportunities like retail, food delivery, home, at home health, all these are spaces which are huge, right? So there is, obviously everybody is super interested. These are evident businesses. Like commonsensically you would want a business like that to happen. So what ends up happening is multiple VCs, like if I go tomorrow find a very good idea and I fund it and I have other people, other VCs in my community who want to also look at that and say, this is a great idea which can make a lot of profit. They will end up funding another company which competes with them, and then you will have a problem where none of the companies get to a profitable margin. Right? And that's what we are seeing in a lot of spaces in India. Because India fundamentally, to most people, in the short run it's a 157 million household country, but in the long run it's a $1 billion people consumption pattern. So people who have deep pockets, so at some point of time it becomes a game of deep pockets and at some point of time, you go away from a few couple of $1 million or $50 million to becoming a couple of $1 billion play. So whoever has that amount of money will play, right? Now the challenge with that, with what at least my as a VC view was, we started to see in 2015, 2016 a lot of fly-by-night operators. I mean, the moment I start getting a lot of iBankers and a lot of McKinsey-style consultants pitching me business ideas, switching over from their high-paid job to doing a startup just because after 15 years of working in the industry, they start getting an itch. It sounds just odd, right? I mean, why are you? And interestingly, this year I did not get, or at least in 2016 towards the end, I did not get any pitches from those people. Right? It was all pitches from mature guys who typically 10 to 11 years of work ex in the Indian IT industry. They are at a juncture where they have done enough work. They are, I want to do something of my own. So our deal flow quality has gone up. The quantity might have dropped, right? So we are looking for those kind of passionate people, right? And sometimes that is what we look for also. But to your point, I mean, if it's an interesting market, you will always see lots and lots of people throwing money at it. So in the hope somebody will make money.
So I think we are not away from the herd mentality. So, like real estate market goes, you have an oversupply and over demand, and it goes through toughs and costs. So I think that really happened, and that may continue to happen. So even in Indian Angel Network, there were some very good deals, and they're from the shared economy. I was interested in a couple of them, and I thought they had proven the cost of acquisition of a customer. They had proven that they could make money. They had proven that at a city level they could break even and actually start making money after so much time. And but everybody felt that nobody's gonna invest in the shared economy models from a VC. So we can fund it. We like the guys. I think they're doing a great job. But because we'll not get the next level of funding, let's not fund them. So the point is that there is a backlash that is happening, and that is true. Okay. Because the perception, at least in the angel community, is that because Flipkart does not make money and everybody is losing money on transactions, fundamentally these companies valuations have come down. Nobody's going to fund it here, and there seems to be some more, are there some good B2B deals? Companies that are in businesses, get into businesses and not consumers. And 2 years back, all the B2B companies couldn't raise any funding because they said, if you don't have a consumer idea, we'll not fund you. So the herd mentality does, follow the whole startup and funding community too.
Shubhankar, you wanted to add to that? Do you think we're at an inflection point? And to his point, are VCs taking a longer term look at companies, and how does sharing economy play into that?
Okay, so those are two very separate questions. So I'll take a stab at each
So
of them.
give me a one-word answer. Do you think companies?
1 word is too less. I'm not going to respond.
Do you think companies are at an inflection point now?
So let me give you a more high-level view. My view, I think VC sentiment in particular is very cyclical, right? There is a attempt or a thought process in terms of, as Alok rightly put, herd mentality. As Prayag said, to get a clearer picture, you have to look more long-term. And that's when the cycle kind of reveals itself. So I think if you look around 2012-13, there was a lull. Hardly any good companies were getting funded. I know that the hard way, right? So 2014-15 was completely the opposite. You were sometimes left wondering how the hell did this company get funded, etc. Right? And to that extent, this of course there are many different factors playing in, right? A lot of good companies that are now household names, the likes of Ola, etc. Right? If you miss one of those deals, you don't want to repeat that mistake, right? Or in other words, fear of missing out, or FOMO as it's called, and it can kind of cause a chain reaction. If it just so happens that the likes of SoftBank, Tiger Global, Naspers, DST, etc. are also throwing money, you kind of feel like joining the party, right? And the moment they leave the party, you think that, hey, it's time probably that the economy is quote-unquote slowing down, although nothing has really changed if you think about it. So my view is this. So at basic principle levels, India as a macro level market, it's just growing. Sure, there's different views that say for the likes of e-commerce, the growth has been probably slowing down over the last year because there have been fewer discounts, etc. But as a macro level, incomes are going up, right? Hopefully, right? And consumption is going up. And so the overall long-term macro level picture is promising, right? Do VCs sometimes fund more companies that are perhaps not as worthy, sure, right? That's the nature of the business. As Prayank rightly said, if you're using VC investment as a proxy for success, that's totally incorrect, right? If VC investment guaranteed a company's success, then I think everybody would be just investing in VC funds. That's really not how it works. And our job is a little bit more trickier than most people give credit for, at least to that extent. Specifically in terms of sharing economy, right? So I would say Prayank's opening argument around 157 million households. So I think if you're trying to over-design for your consumer, that's probably not the right way to go, not just for sharing economy, but for any new paradigm. If you're expecting like a villager to suddenly start booking Ubers and book on Oyo rooms, etc., it's not going to happen. So you have to start from where it kind of pinches the most, start from a utilitarian use case to a more hedonistic use case. So what matters? So if you're talking about a villager, probably he's thinking more, hey, how can I learn English? How can I improve my job prospects? How can I get better healthcare, right? And there are actually good companies out there trying to solve these problems in a sharing economy principle right away. So there are companies like Khan Academy, helping people learn. We have a company in our portfolio called Culture Alley, which is helping rural aspirers, urban aspirers learn English, right? So there are definitely companies out there which have kind of incorporated this principle and are solving for it, right? So I think it goes step by step. If you are expecting people to book Uber, you have to solve for the missing layers. You have to solve for the income problem, you have to solve for the English problem, you have to solve for the consumption problem. And are there companies doing that? For sure, right? Will all of them succeed? No way. That's not really how this works.
Just to answer the question on inflection point. Right? So, see, it's true that today the customer acquisition costs are high. I'll just draw a parallel here. So I've been in the business for 5 years. 5 years ago, we funded Taxi for Share. And that was my first deal. 90% of the business was through call centers. You won't believe that today if I tell you, can you call the Uber call center or you would not think of it. But 5 years ago, just 5 years ago, it used to be call centers. And then we've been tracking how long does it take for our companies to get to 1 million consumers. So Taxi for Sure, for example, took 3 years. The companies after that have, like Swiggy, for example, now got to 1 million consumers in like 9 months, right? So the speed at which technology adoption is growing, and to just give you another example, I thought about it, right? So why is this happening? So in India, let's say WhatsApp users, let's say 120 million MAUs of WhatsApp, probably, right? In China, you have 650 million people using WeChat. If a consumer finds something interesting, the speed at which it gets socially viral is like so high in China. So it's like 4 times the speed. And that's why the companies over there, we went there and like companies are scaling from 0 to 300 million users in like 3 months. I'm like, what's happening here? How can you get 300 million consumers in 3 months? So that was happening. So I think where we are now, and then probably give it a year or two, you will start seeing companies scale super fast. And then we've seen it. And our own companies are scaling so fast simply because of the adoption of internet is so high. To Anuj's point, right? So, more and more mobile internet users are coming in. Connectivity is improving better. Some of our companies are reporting, like people who are using Geo are using it the same way as people use it in the West. Huge amounts, like almost is using it as unlimited data. So the session times on the mobile apps are through the roof. Like they are 10 times of what a normal 3G or 2G user in India would use. So that change is happening at a very fundamental layer, and you have to. It's not in our hands, your mind, because it's at the level of the telcos, at the level of the government, how they help. The government has to reduce the price of the spectrum, so the telcos can give it more for free. So that's the way to. So these are fundamental shifts, and India is a growing economy, like Shubhankar said, right? So we'll start seeing these major disruptions happening either through policy, like the demonetization was a major shock, but suddenly because of it, you are starting to see wallets and digital payments take a cut, significantly increase. GST is going to be another shock to the system, suddenly because of it, all B2B commerce and everything will become more efficient. So these things will keep on happening, and these are moments of opportunity for anybody when you're thinking through that this is happening. What can I do now using this?
Is there any question at this point? Oh wow! You raised your hand first, so we'll go there.
Yeah, I'm Shomo. I'm not a founder, but I have some interesting sort of observations about the shared economy when it comes from VC investments. There's a lot of old boy club, at least at a VC level. I'm not sure what it is at the angel level, where let's say Axel and Nexus and Sequoia, I mean, there'll be a consortium of people who will invest together. So what I wanted to kind of actually understand is that does that dilute the kind of original evaluation of a business idea and, on its merit? And it's like joint responsibility. So if the investment goes down, it's again, diluted in that sense. So are you really looking at original models? And the second is vertical versus horizontal innovation, right? So I think VCs understand the China and India story when you adopt a US business model. But, something which is unique to India and, something which is very different from what you've seen, except the India demographics and, relevance with some minor tinkering. So how would you really look at these new vertical business ideas?
Alok,
Sorry.
yeah, well, just to shake things up, why don't Alok, Anuj, or Shubhankar take it?
Okay, so by the way, very valid question, right? A very valid observation as well. If I have to ignore reality and say it doesn't happen, I think it will be a very incorrect observation to make. Is there an inherent mentality amongst VCs to seek consensus, either with other investors or the voices that matter, so to speak? Yes, right? And you have to understand why that is the case. At the end of the day, when you're a VC, you're managing someone else's money, and you have a fiduciary responsibility to return it, make outsized returns, etc. Think of it as an individual, right? How would you make your best effort to get a sense that, hey, you know what, this looks like a good opportunity, and I can probably get someone to invest in the future, and probably, this is going to be a great investment. And how do you feel about investing in a company where the whole world says this is a bad decision, but you yourself take the leap and invest? You'll probably be ridiculed for it, right? What's the easier thing to do? The easier thing to do is to hear from a few guys. They either like it, right, or they invest along with you, right? And if that works, you can take credit for it. It'll work well, but then you get called. You're told that you're giving into the herd mentality, right? Although historically it has been revealed that the best bets tend to be ones that you don't follow the consensus, right? So obviously there's a bit of balancing going on.
So I'll just add a line and then I'll give it to you. So, there was the CIOs, the old time saying 20, 30 years back, if you bought IBM, you'll never get sacked. Because, let's say, okay, I bought IBM, and if the project failed, it's IBM's problem, not mine. So I think that's what the safety net allows individuals to do.
Okay, so I completely disagree with what has been said. Right? And I'll tell you why. There's a logical explanation. So VC is a very cutthroat business. Right? I don't want the deal which I am doing to tell to Shubhankar. Shubhankar is doing a deal he does not want to tell to me. There is certain dynamics here. Shubhankar is a slightly smaller fund, so I can muscle in into valuation, give the guy a higher valuation and take him out. It's a good business. He'll not get an opportunity to invest. VC co-investments typically happen in capital-intensive businesses. So if you look, for example, we co-invested in Swiggy, right? Because it's a hyper-local business. For you to be able to grow the company, and like Anuj rightly said, customer acquisition costs are high, operational costs are very high in India, especially in hyper-local businesses. Having two VCs together in one deal allows the company to, if they stumble, we can give them together more bridge, right? So that is the reason why you see a lot of consumer businesses where there's a lot of customer acquisition costs and operational things. Two or more VCs are coming together to fund a business. Mind you, there are very few VCs in India. That's the other problem, right? So, which is a good problem and a bad problem. So you will always see in India it becomes very quickly a duopoly. There will be, for example, it was Flipkart and Flipkart and Snapdeal. Unless until somebody had a lot of capital, there was no Amazon, right? There is Urban Clap and there is HouseJob. There is Swiggy and there is Zomato. You will not see tens and tens of those, right? So very quickly it comes down to number one, number two player, right? So that is one aspect of why VCs cooperate. But we also compete heavily. So what does not get reported is all our non-consumer portfolio. See, consumer portfolio has to become public. So so the moment it becomes public, you start seeing that some other VC will also fund it. So that's why the two VCs have come together, the two other VCs will come together. But you look at SaaS, you look at other spaces which are not so sexy, where you are not going after a couple of $1 billion of market, you will start seeing VCs individually funding one company, and then hopefully the company on its merit growing further and further. To give you some example, you asked about vertical and horizontal. So if you look India-specific businesses, we forget about a Byju's, we forget about a QMath in education, we forget about a Baxi or a Rapido, which is India-centric, right? Yes, they could have copied the idea from Gojek, but you forget about a Book My Show, which is very India-centric, right? We have Black Book, which is our trucking company, it's also very India-centric. It's because that market structure exists only in India, that you have single truck owners. It's not there anywhere else in the world. If there is somewhere else, you will find those. So the people say it's a copy paste, but it's not actually copy paste. If it's just proven business model. So a cost of funding a business and learning whether it's a good or bad, it comes down lower for a VC because he's seen that model work somewhere else. It's not a belief. It's actually seen, okay, that model works. So we would get all the data from that business. We understand the unit economics. It's working there. So why not? I mean, it's just common sense. I mean, why should I give a company $2 million when in $1 million the company could have proven the business model? So that's the big difference. But they are India-centric.
Did you want to add? No. Speaking of that, speaking of copy pasting from the West and whether it works in India, my next question was actually that. I'm curious to know, especially talking about the sharing economy model, what are the few, India-specific quirks you would say that make you personally wary of, this entire model in India? Like, for example, we all know that Uber, Ola had this long-going fight with the government because they can't figure out whether they're taxis or not. Similarly for other sectors, right? Each one of you, if you could say what is your topmost fear or wariness for this sharing economy model?
Well, I think the biggest is regulation, because the government can just stop anything very simply in India. Sharing economy, one of the reasons Airbnb never took off in India is simply because of trust and security issues, right? So, and by chance if something mishap happens, then the business will just die out, right? So that's a challenge, and it has been proven in case of Ola or Taxi for sure. These mishaps happened, and then suddenly the whole business, a couple of companies just went up in flames, right?
Yeah. So. Mine, issues are largely very markets that are quite different. So, we don't have a uniform market. We have quite a fragmented market from a consumer needs perspective. That is one. Second thing I think is also, there was talk about which are the markets that are likely to go. I think there's a huge opportunity in the education side. That's one of the last bastions that is still working, very old model of industrial age. And that's not really changed. I think that's going to go through a fundamental change in the next decade. And I think, and that's going to be here and in global, because people don't want to learn the subjects, don't want to go to school, don't want to complete their engineering. Even if they're doing their graduation, they're not getting jobs. So the value of a degree is worthless today. Okay, and it's all about skill. So I think that market is majorly going into disruption. I think that's firstly. Vary of the fragmentation of the market, okay, in terms of this thing, and obviously the regulation. Education market is going to, I think, has to fight regulation even more than the taxi market has.
Yeah. So, kind of agree with you. Education is one sector where we see that lot of gap is there. But at the same time, I will also say that there are a lot of other sectors which we can focus on. Like one is healthcare, one is agriculture, one is education, and there are a bunch of other things which basically boils down to consumer needs and people who are not staying in urban areas, especially in rural areas. For example, demonetization, it affected the most in rural areas, right? So what are we going to do about it, right? And at the same time, I will also say that the quality matters a lot, and if the quality is not good, maybe we are not going to reach that mark where we can see the profit coming in and basically staying longer in the market.
So for me, the main sticking point I think is trust, which is a subset of what Priyank said. I think we at least thus far, as a cultural group, as a community, tend to prize the concept of trust. I think we get a great deal more comfort when we can hold an institution or an organization accountable, be it for healthcare, education, etc. Compared with when it is an individual, because I think there's an inherent fear that that individual can go missing. Of course, there's a ton of reasons for that as well, because all of these guys are not mapped, etc. So I think that's the biggest hurdle. More infrastructural changes need to be addressed in order to solve the core problem of trust.
That's okay, we can share. So speaking of regulations and speaking of trust, also speaking about quality issues, I think one of the biggest, problem areas for any company that, falls under the broad umbrella of a sharing model is quality. The moment, as a user, we know, right? Like the moment a company scales up, if it's a taxi service, their cabbies and their cabs get dirty. If it is somebody who's coming to my house, to service me in other areas, their services fall. So as VCs, firstly, how involved are you with your portfolio companies in this regard? Like, do you personally keep a check, or do you talk to your founders saying, hey guys, we are also users and your service is crap? Does that happen? And B, it's a people-centric business. So is there really a way for entrepreneurs to make sure that these kind of issues don't crop up? Who wants to take this? Nobody wants to take this.
I'm holding the mic, so let me take a go.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, what was the question again?
How involved are you?
Sorry. Oh yeah. Okay, so see, the first thing is, the sad reality here is that unfortunately, and perhaps this is a little bit more heightened in India compared with other communities, the effect of negative reviews or negative feedback is so much greater, right? And in many ways, it tends to undermine the good work that companies and entrepreneurs put in, right? For all the good work that OYO has done, probably all it takes for you to make a judgment on them is some Facebook post you've read, similar stuff about Uber and all the other services, right? So a few reviews here and there doesn't necessarily mean that there's inherently something wrong, right? Goes back to the original premise of there being hundreds of millions or a billion people. The real challenge in a sharing economy sort of business in a country like India compared with, say, if it were in Europe or US, etc. Of course, China is a different beast altogether. Is you have to make that happen at a scale of that kind, right? Where all it takes is a few stray errors and it can get blown out of proportion, right? Is there a way that at least I know of which works legitimately? Not really, to be frank, right? But that's the real challenge, right? One way, of course, is to find a way to, before it escalates, find a way to solve this and solve the negative sentiment, which of course is a space and a business problem of its own. But leaving that aside, I think we all need to kind of just have that as a sobering reminder, not to form a very harsh judgment based on a few stray incidents here and there.
Anuj?
Yeah. So I would say two things here. Whenever you're building a product or an application, go for a good user experience. Because when it comes to the quality, if I am a user of your application or a product, if the user experience is not good, I'm stuck, my journey is not so smooth, I will definitely go and give a negative review. Or maybe I will stop using the application itself. So that is one, that is a user experience perspective. But also the second thing what I would like to mention, that at Google, we have an umbrella program known as Google Launchpad program, where we have a 6 months kind of accelerator and things around it, where we provide one-on-one mentorships to these startups and what are the selected startups. But at the end of the day, do we have a right mentorship? That helps a lot. And I'm sure that when we are talking about sharing economy, BHIVE itself is like a co-working space, again a sharing economy, right? So at the end of the day, do we have a right mentor network? Do we have right mentors who are guiding us through our challenge what we are going to solve? And if it is there, I'm sure this quality will be taken care.
Priyank, you want to say something?
So we've faced this problem in multiple companies, and typically the best solution we've come out with is you break the problem into two parts. First is processes, and second is scale. So the only way a company is able to deliver quality is by first setting processes in place, right? So you have a team. Let's say you're in Bangalore and you want to figure this out. You first figure out, how do I make sure that my process does not fail for a consumer, right? Am I delivering quality? That's the first, before you figure out scale, right? So you do it over, let's say you're doing 10 transactions per day, you're doing 50, you're doing 100. you first get to that level, you perfect those edge cases. Once you solve for that, you bring in technology so that when there is a catch, there's always an exception, there's something built out to figure out this is going to fail. And then once you figure it out, you pass it to a scaling team. That okay, now I figured this is the process, this is how you run. Go do growth marketing, go spend your money and scale this business. So that's the template which you use for our companies. So that's one. Two, I think it's very hard to perfect the process, right? So there was one of our companies used to report that 5% of my consumers face an issue. And we would go and anecdotally, so you were asking how do VCs behave, we would go and anecdotally ask a lot of people that how was your experience, how was your friends and family, and very quickly they will come back, I had a very bad experience with those guys, right? So everybody I talked to, out of 10 people, 9 people are saying they had a bad experience, but my company is reporting only 5% of the users had an issue, right? How is that possible, right? So the company would report 5% of my transactions had an issue, and not users. We were not able to track it so this is a process issue. They were not able to track it at the user level. They were only able to track it at the transaction issue. So it scratched a lot of heads. And then I happened to meet a very wise friend of mine. And I was like, so he's a maths guru. So he's like, this is a probability problem. If you are how is it a probability problem, man? So he's like, see, 5% of your users are having an issue on a daily basis. The chance that you as a consumer will not have an issue is 0.95. The next day you will not have an issue is 0.95 into 0.95. So the probability is rapidly diminishing that you will have an issue, right? So by the 30th day, there's an 80% chance that you as a user, any user in that system will have an issue with the company, right? So over a 2-month period, everybody all consumers of that company would have faced an issue. And consumers in India are unforgiving, right? If it fails the first time, it's going to fail every time. I'm not going to touch this at all. It takes a hard thing to get. So that's why before you get to millions of users and you have that 5% failure rate on millions of users, your company will die very fast, right? So you have to first get the processes right so that 5% is 1% or less, and then you scale.
So get your back in line, find a good mentor, and sometimes ask your users not to be so unforgiving and not to take. No, actually, you can't ask them not to give you negative reviews. That's just going to happen. I think I'm being told we are at the end of we don't have time. I know there were more hands for questions, so maybe once we're done here, you can grab them once they step off the platform and then ask their questions there, yeah? Okay. I think we're being asked to clear off from the stage. Thanks guys for coming in. Thanks for sitting in with us.
Thank you so much. I'm sure it's been an enriching experience for everyone out here to listen to this panel discussion. So we have goodies for all of you. So our volunteers will be handing that over to you guys. Good. That's a good incentive.
Thanks guys for staying so late. We are between you and dinner.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so wait, there's a short quiz out here, so we have to finish it off. So please be a part of it. The rules are the same for the quiz. If you know the answer, please raise your hand. And also, you can just, look under your seat. There are goodies, under certain seats. So please take a look. We have Rapido vouchers.
Okay, a few of you lucky people have Rapido vouchers under your seats. If you have the time, go ahead and see whether you're one of those lucky few. Awesome. So we're going to go on to our next set of prizes. I would like to call upon stage Siddharth from our executive office to give out the next few. So in the course of preparation of this particular event, we put out a challenge called the Twitterati Challenge to everyone who's in touch with BHIVE, right? And the basic concept was to see how many tweets you could send out within that short span of time. And we have our two winners. Do we have a Suman Kumar out here? There you go. Come up on stage and collect your prize. A round of applause to Suman Kumar. Our second winner is Vibha Bharatwaj. Are you here, Vibha? There we go. Okay, so that you can go ahead and give the prize away.
We finished our acceleration program.
Now for the rest of y'all, we have a few more questions. If you're able to answer all of them, well and good, we have prizes to give away. Same rules apply. I ask the question, you guys know the answer, raise your hands. I pass the mic to y'all, answer, and we will have a gift giveaway, right? Question number 1. Name 3 companies in the transport sector which fall under the sharing economy category. Ola, Uber and Rapido, congratulations, you have won a prize. Siddharth, go ahead. Awesome. Our next question. Name 3 crowdfunding platforms. Any hands? Any hands? No? Really? There you go, yes. Louder, louder, we like to be loud here on BHIVE. We have another winner. Come on guys, prizes are getting over. Now, one more answer. Which is the cell phone carrier to give free local and roaming calls to any network and the lowest international call tariffs in the world? Jio. Brilliant answer.
Jio, sir, Jio.
And for our final question, which famous hospitality chain made a buzz when they started offering rooms to unmarried couples by a dash mode option? Name the company.
I know it. I know the answer. Stay, uncle.
I heard it first from there. There we go. It's Oyo Rooms. Right? Alright guys, that was the last question for the day. Sorry to all of y'all who either didn't know the answers. Also, I'd like to introduce our catering partners. 48 Asia. 48 East, sorry, my bad. 48 East. Go ahead, try their food, they're brilliant. And representatives from Rapido, thank you so much for all the gifts. We are eternally grateful.
It's been an enormous pleasure to host all of you. Thank you so much for coming to this event. And it's been a pleasure. So, you are here from So we're giving it to a person from Head Start, Venkat. Yeah, so Venkat, the stage is all yours.
Okay, I'm sorry guys, I'm standing between you, dinner and sleep as well, and house. So, okay, so I'm here to help you guys. Alright, so since I want to drive the point that I'm, here to help, I'm standing in between you guys, right? Okay? Okay, I'm still not getting the attention of... Okay, there's a limit. Okay, this is the wireless. Okay, cool. So, how are we going to help you? We're going to help you startups, early stage entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs move to the next growth level. We are told with research that the top 5 startup issues are funding, hiring, networking, inspiration, and mentorship. So, we are Head Start Network, India's largest non-profit, volunteer-driven organization working at the grassroots level to solve every single issue that a startup faces. And feel free to approach us for any help you guys will need with your startup. We're there. We're all volunteers, kicked about just helping you guys out. Okay? And yeah. So We are super happy that we are partnered with BHIVE for BuzzFest and look forward to seeing you guys. So our next meetup, Startup Saturday, is on Feb 11 on the theme Building an A Team, and we have a meetup for women entrepreneurs B on Feb 18. So look forward to catching you guys there. Thanks.
Check. Thank you so much, everyone. And to keep the spirits going, we have our in-house rock star, Mr. Irshad. Irshad, we got to see you on stage, buddy. First, Irshad. So Irshad is going to play some nice, beautiful music for us, and say hi, John. John is our in-house photographer, a true blue rock star. We love this man, selfless guy, and we always pose for him.
DJ, spin that shit.
All of us.
Let's start as soon as possible. I think Irshad is going first. So I'm just going first. Irshad is second. I just have to set up my. Hey Irshad, let's start as soon as possible.
Hi guys, I'm singing Imagine by John Lennon. It's a beautiful song, talks about world peace.
Hey Irshad, you wanna stand here somewhere? Okay.
Hey John. Can you look up for
This alone?
This is like
It's open photos.
Oh yeah, no, the problem is with the
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above is only sky. Imagine all the people living life in peace. Imagine there's no country. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. And your relation to. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join it, and the world is one. Imagine no possession. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, well, I'm not the only one. I hope someday you join it, and the world will live this way. Thank you.
should be on.
Sakrit, do you want to sing?
Which one? Which one? Which one? What do you want to sing? You don't want me to sing? I'm going to sing some. You can sing. Do you want to sing? Anybody anything? I have no idea. For sure. Wow.
Captain doesn't need.
For sure. Yeah, that's right.
Captain!
You will just okay. Or should we just I think it just come up here very weird. Yeah? Wait, what do you want to say?
Rohin, let me look at my carrier delivery system. We can do that. But come for this, okay? Dream of California. Just go like You want to sing? Come. I have the lyrics.
Psychic spies from China try to steal your mind's elation. Little guys from Sweden dream of service with protection. And if you want this kind of dream, it's Californication. It's the edge of the world and all of Western civilization. Sunday rising east, LA fell in the final location. It's understood that Hollywood says Californication. Be a surgeon everywhere to break the spell of aging. Celebrities can assess your chill as your war you're waging. Firstborn unicorn, I come softborn. Dream of Californication. Dream of Californication. Mind me down. Magical girl in the fed to my world, be a way on constellation. A teenage bride with a baby inside, getting high on information. 5 years time, the bowling waters, Californication. Californication. They used to very well to break the spell of aging. Celebrities dinners, let's just share, let's you all your waiting. First morning call, I go softball. Dream of Californication. Dream of Californication. Dream of Californication. Dream of Californication.
Anybody wants to sing?
One man, one opportunity to take a big ass picture with the BHIVE family. Calling all BHIVE to the stage.
Huh? Oh, louder, huh? This mic is unreasonably loud. Suddenly. Yeah.
Come fast.
Yeah.
Come on, Pranam.
What, Nam? He wanted to finish. He said yo.
Honey singer.
Let them come. We take more photographs, but now let's not miss this opportunity.
I'm okay to sit down.
Okay?
Not me.
You want to stand here? Okay, we are on camera.
Say cheese.
Thank you very much, Ron.
One more because we all know the first one sucked. Hey, you want to do one? Mid-eye one?
Cheese. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've hijacked the stage. So I'm guessing it's a wrap.
You were right there.
Sounds like a song that I know.